Yo, what's shaking, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Orangebloods Modcast. It's good to be back. I was gone a week ago, but I'm back. Anwar Richardson, Jason Suchomel. No Alex Dunlap today. He's got something he's handling. I forgot exactly what it was, but it seems like he had a 12:30 something going on. So it's just the three of us as we head towards the home stretch of Texas and its spring football schedule. They've got, I guess, a couple more. They got Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then the spring game coming up in 9 days from now. Anwar Richardson, Jason Suchomel, fellas. Where do we begin? It's been a strange week. It's a football program that's now, like I said, in the home stretch, right? We're basically 70-75% through what they'll be doing leading into the rest of the offseason, going into the summer. Do we begin with kind of the just weirdness of this week a little bit? I mean, the Moro Ajomo comments and then Sarkisian's comments behind them have had a little bit of a longer shelf life than I thought they would. Anwar, you tell me. You take the baton. You take the race anywhere you want to go.
I'll take that baton of Moro and Sark. I will throw it to the side. Because there's just nothing good that's going to come of that for anyone's name. But can I start? And we can go back to it if we need to. Can I start with two things that I thought stood out from today?
You've got the baton. Take us.
There was two things that I found really interesting where they allowed us to speak to the quarterbacks today. Catch, there's obviously Quinn Ewers and Hudson Card. I'm going to give you the thing that stood out from Hudson that you're quite aware of because it's already on the board. I'm going to tell you the thing that stood out for me from Quinn. The thing that I thought was interesting from Hudson is I asked him a question about, when's he graduating? Because that's always been the question of what's he going to be doing futuristically wise. And he said the fall of 2023, that seems to be where he's heading towards. And that to me then, Catch, meant when we start thinking about this quarterback room and possible attrition, and look, attrition is just what's going to happen nowadays, especially with the transfer portal. You can't avoid it. And so, knowing that no matter what happens in that quarterback room, Hudson Card will be there, and you'll have a stacked room with Quinn, Hudson, and Malik. Murphy is assuming he's healthy in August, and I'm sure Jason has his fingers crossed. That I thought was really interesting to know that, and then also being able to think in advance of what they may need potentially in 2023. And I thought the second thing that I thought was interesting, Catch, wasn't necessarily what Quinn said, but the fact that Quinn was speaking. And the one thing that's been really interesting to me this spring, Catch, is that most coaches, when there's a quarterback battle, kind of shy away from the young guy. Like they kind of distance themselves. They kind of put him, he's young. He's still got to work his way. Here's my veteran, so on and so forth. And the fact that they allowed Quinn, a redshirt freshman, by the way, to speak, to be as catching. You and I talked about the Moro thing. When the coach allows you to speak, he views you as one of the leaders in the locker room, a potential face of the program. And the fact that Quinn was allowed to speak to us today as a guy who's been on campus, Catch, since January, very telling, Catch. I mean, it's very telling of what he believes about Quinn, what he thinks about Quinn, and where Quinn ranks within the program. We didn't speak to both quarterbacks last year until after the spring game. We've gotten both of them a week and change beforehand. So I'm just talking about for like two things like right away that could be somewhat positive. Those are the two things that if you said take the baton, I'd say let's start here.
But Omar, if you didn't bring Quinn out, then people are going to read into it either way, man. And you bring Quinn out, like that's a good sign for Quinn. But if you don't bring Quinn out, people are going to speculate as to why not. And is that a sign? And then I just read your comment on Card. He's saying fall of 2023, which means assuming he doesn't transfer before then, he would be here for next football season as well.
Unless he said graduates, right? So
yeah.
I think that there's maybe you may make some technicalities where maybe he finishes up his degree in like December or so, and maybe he graduates, or I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out.
I took that as to say, first of all, I thought they brought the quarterbacks out to take us away from the Moro Ajomo situation. They literally picked the only two guys that I don't think would have been asked a follow-up question about what happened the previous 2 times somebody has met with the media. Probably pretty astute planning. I mean, the moment the quarterbacks come out, the more Jomo stuff just rest in peace, Gilbert Godfrey, but it did kind of remind me of his scene in Beverly Hills Cop 2 when it's like, if I could put something in this hand and make you forget about that thing in your other hand, what would it be? Instead of $200, it was 2 quarterbacks. And I think that, in the end, everybody's a winner for that because I thought it made for a more interesting media access. And on card, yes, Jason, he said he graduates in the fall semester of 2023, which would have you think December, which if that's the case and that he doesn't adjust anything, then it would mean that he's here for 2 more seasons. My gut tells me that if he really wanted out, which in today's media session, he made a point to say, I'm at my dream school. You're going to have competition everywhere you play. There's no reason for me to transfer. I think he's presenting this is just kind of where it's at. I bet that can be sped up a little bit. I bet you can take an extra class or 2 next semester if you really wanted it. But what I found interesting about that was there's a spring semester in 2023 that, based on the current timeline, would indicate he would still either be here for spring practices in 2023, or he'd be one of those guys, if it ever comes to it, that announces early and then he's like Ochaun Mathis, or one of these guys that makes a decision and then finishes out their school, but he won't be able to go to a new school at the earliest until the summer. And yes, as it sounds like,
I don't say it that way. If he graduates in the
fall,
December of 2023, he could enroll somewhere in January, right?
Of 2024.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about there's a world where he could be at another school in 2023, but based on where he is now, it wouldn't be as simple as after the season, enter your name into the portal, and then you're at another school in January, right? Like we've seen Ryan Watts and a few guys. He would, I think, fit probably the Ochaun Mathis type deal where he could announce earlier if he wanted to, but he will almost certainly be in the University of Texas system in the spring of 2023.
Right.
And, it does, I think, set a good window for us to keep an eye on. He's going to be here for a while. And we already knew that he was almost certainly going to be here during the fall, but you didn't absolutely know it. I thought Anwar asking that question today and getting a bit of a definitive answer just helped us a little bit more with knowing what's going on with Hudson Card instead of talking about what people are talking about behind the scenes. Anwar, with both of those guys, nothing. I mean, it doesn't sound like there was there a headline other than that comes out of these 2 guys meeting with the media today?
No, I mean, Quinn was asked a lot about the Ohio State, experience, but you can tell he's very media savvy because he kind of talked about putting those things in kind of the rearview mirror and didn't really expand on any of those things that happened in Ohio State, and basically just wanted to come back home, be at Texas, and be here and be happy. So. Yes, Luke, I multitask. I'm in the chat. I'm talking to you guys live. I'm doing everything. I'm not quite. Ben wanted to know why it was at the press conference. I'm at every press conference, Ben. That's definitely part of the job description. So I don't think either guy said anything, Ketch, when you'll see it tonight, that you're going to say, whoa, he said this. You've heard Hudson Card talk, and Jason, you've interviewed Hudson Card for years. I mean, he's very to the point, a little bit dry at times, but he's just very to the point. He's not going to give you headlines. And Quinn, again, media savvy enough to not take the bait whenever the bait was kind of given to him. So, but, he seems to be feeling, Quinn, from a Quinn perspective, he seems to be saying he's feeling, getting more comfortable. I think what's interesting, most people noticed the Longhorn tattoo he's got on his thigh when I tweeted out the picture. And he's got like a big ass Longhorn tattoo. I think it's on his left thigh. So But yeah, I mean, there was nothing earth shattering, but just making those guys available was probably the big thing.
And it's interesting, Anwar, that you say Quinn media savvy, because I don't think he did interviews at Ohio State. I'm assuming not, and he really didn't do many even in high school. So for him to be media savvy with very little experience in front of the media is pretty impressive. So
yeah, it's interesting too. And so he kind of talked about, someone asked him, when is the last hit that he took? And the last hit that he probably took in a game was in that state championship game. Which has been a while ago. Like it's been, where we at, Catch, like 2 years, a year and a half or so ago.
Year and a half, yeah.
Yeah. 17 months.
Yeah, December of 2 Decembers ago. So
yeah. So I think someone did ask him, like, did he have any regrets as far as leaving early, skipping in? That was the whole.
He's like, hell no. A, you know how much money I made.
Exactly.
And B, do you know how that gets me potential to the NFL a year faster by doing that? Like, Quinn is on the Quinn plan. No regrets.
No regrets on that. And someone asked him about NIL, and he's like, that's a personal matter. So that's what I'm saying, Jason. Like, there was things that he could have taken the bait and ran with, and he just refused. He just didn't. He knew what a potential answer could mean, and he was like, I ain't going down that road.
Isn't he driving a Lambo or something like that? Like, these guys, there's no reason in his life at this point to regret anything about the path he's on right now. We all should be living the Quinn Ewers life right now.
Anwar, Texas probably repeatedly told him, you can't talk about this. Don't talk about it. I guarantee he was coached up as to what he could and couldn't.
Oh, I mean, Bianco had a film session with him and definitely was like, you hear this? Don't go there. But, as a guy, sometimes when a guy says less, like to your point, Jason, you avoid the pitfalls. Morrow's a guy who likes to talk.
Yeah.
And sometimes the more you talk, the more you open yourself
up. I
up.
love that like 9 people have jumped in to say that he drives a Corvette, that we all know, or I guess I know there's a picture of him in a car that everybody shared, but that everybody's like, no, it's a Corvette, and here's the license plate number.
Bijan has the Lambo.
People.
Markel is right. Markel is right. Bijan is the one with the Lambo.
Yeah. Nobody has a Ferrari yet.
Just ask. Let's just put it out there. I mean,
that's right, fellas. Who on the team? Does Isaiah Nayer have the Ferrari? Does anybody have a Ferrari? I wonder what Xavier's driving these days. I wanted to take us in. If anybody should be driving a Ferrari on this team, it should be.
Hell yeah!
It should be Xavier Worthy. I wanted to early in this modcast take us into transfer portal talk, mainly because I've already seen a variation of various. We've got one from who is this here? From Eric asking about Mims and Georgia. So let's just do this. Position by position, we'll go through the scuttlebutt of transfer portal stuff because I think that is one of the first things, even more so than the stuff that's taking place in practice and who's standing out. And we can get into recruiting a little bit, but people are portal addicted. Obviously, nothing at quarterback, nothing at the running back position. There has been some discussion this week about the Alabama transfer, Jason. A lot of people, at this point.
You talking about Vincent Hall?
The kid from Alabama that has the weird first name.
Ajayi Hall or something. I don't even know.
Yeah, Ajay, I think, but that may be wrong. Ajay Hall. At this point, there's nothing definitive with him. No.
Vincent is his dad. I apologize. Vincent is his dad. I apologize.
The only visit that has been set up is
Vincent might be more interesting.
That Anwar first reported on Monday, which is that Ochaun Mathis will be on campus next Saturday for the spring game, which will be his second visit. All of the other names that have been mentioned, there's literally, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point, nothing is so far down the road with any of those guys where there's a visit, where there's more than maybe just a little bit of contact. I know that everybody wants to wants there to be something else going on there. But other than Mathis, nothing else has taken that next step.
Yeah, it seems like these transfer portal, every time there's a name that enters the portal, it winds up on our message board, and it just tends to get overblown a little bit, it seems like, in terms of their interest in Texas, or maybe even Texas's interest in these players. Anytime a decent linebacker enters the portal, Texas is going to at least reach out. I mean, Hall, I've kicked the tires on him, and he doesn't speak. He didn't speak as a recruit. I don't have much background on him, but I don't believe he's scheduled to visit. I haven't heard that or seen that or talked to anybody who said that. Caleb Johnson, the former Texas linebacker who transferred out, he's now at UCLA.
That's a weird rumor.
It really is. And he's looking to transfer. I mean, Texas has talked to him. I think he's at Miami, I think right now, as a matter of fact, on an official visit. And best I can tell, people in Miami think he's probably going to wind up there, maybe even before he leaves town. So might he come to Texas on a visit? Maybe. I don't think anything's set up yet. It's funny, man. Caleb and we actually used to talk a ton when Texas was recruiting him out of JUCO. And I'm going to have some of this in the war room, but I hit him up this week and he has not responded. But you know who's recruiting him down at Miami? Charlie Strong. Charlie Strong is recruiting him down at Miami. So there's confidence there. Mims, the former 5-star offensive lineman out of Georgia. Texas has talked to him. I reached out to a Texas source and I just said, hey, how interested are y'all? And, this person said, kind of, I don't remember exactly the terminology, but said kind of moderately, we'll see. And then this person said they're more excited about the incoming freshmen they have coming in, and they're more focused on that than they are Amarius Mims. So, might they turn up the pressure a little bit and bring him in for a visit? Possibly. There's talk that he did commit to Florida State on his visit that just wrapped up. He's denying it, but I think of all those guys, I don't know that I would put Texas, certainly not the leader for any of them, other than Ochaun Mathis, who Anwar can talk about. But I think those other three that I just mentioned are, I don't know that I'd call them long shots. That may be a little bit extreme, but I think it's an uphill battle for Texas to land any of those guys.
It's interesting. Sark was asked on Tuesday about numbers, and it was a question that he didn't give a specific answer to. And, I think it's just an indication that things are still fluid on that front. I mean, they're still waiting to see who might enter. And, I'm curious at some point if Sark will be asked about the procedures in place that would allow for them to, because we're still speculating that if they were, let's work under the assumption that they get Ochaun Mathis. And that should be it. They shouldn't mathematically have any more room to take anybody else, but there are ways to do that. They're like dark arts of college football roster building. And, when Anwar, he was asked the question, he didn't really get into that. He just talked about how it's a day-to-day thing and you want to get through the spring and see what your position groups look like and what might happen with injuries. And it's a bit strange because they really don't have that type of flexibility on paper, but clearly they're not working with a shut mind with regards to what possibly could happen. So they'll keep us on our toes. And Jason, every time a name enters the portal, if that kid had a 5-star ranking, you better get ready for, has Texas reached out? Is Texas going to do that? And at some point, they got to be pretty careful. It always does, Anwar, interest me that who they select to be somebody that they would go out. It doesn't seem to be as cut and clear as just a position group. Sometimes I think those high rankings help too, though.
There's definitely everybody who has a ranking is something that, could they, whatever. I mean, there's people write stories without saying much as relates to some of this stuff. So it's very interesting. It's fascinating. But, for me, like, Jason said, you can kick the tires on it. The one thing we know for sure is Ochaun Mathis. Like that's the only one that you can guarantee that says this guy set up a visit. This guy's coming next week. that's a guy that's potentially very obtainable. And that's a guy that, has an impact as opposed to some of the other, guesswork, because the guy goes into a portal and, like you said, has a high ranking, you can do that for any position. Ketchum, we just wanted to say every single day, this guy went into the portal, Texas could contact them. They haven't, but you never know. It could happen. I mean, we could do that every single day. And of course, people would say that's clickbait because it would be you and I, because rules don't apply. But yeah, Ochaun to me is the only guy, that's really worth focusing on at this moment.
Was that comment from Ochaun's? Is Ochaun Mathis? Is that?
Yeah, someone I think has potentially like an alias that they're calling themselves Ochaun Mathis. I don't think that's Ochaun.
Or is that a family member of his? I don't know.
I'm going to assume that.
Hey, it could be.
Hey, jump on in some more with comments if you're an auntie or anything like that, or a brother. I don't know.
We'll bring you on the Modcast. Jump on.
Absolutely. There's no reason not to. But yes, I did.
Our mama says, so there you go.
Oh, well, there you go. I don't even know what to say to that. But hello, Mrs. Mathis, if in fact, or Miss.
If that is Mrs. Mathis, then I would say that's a good sign for Texas. If you want to read tea leaves,
it's not a bad sign.
That's not a bad sign. And she's checking out to see what they're saying about that. I mean, unless she's just really thinks I'm very handsome.
Well,
and
we know that ain't the case.
It's about Suchomel, Anwar. If it's about handsomeness, it's about Suchomel, just so you know. I think what's interesting about, I think back to the Minnesota offensive linemen that they were recruiting in December, where they had kicked the tires on that guy to the point where he was pretty gung-ho, obviously, because I think he ended up signing with Rutgers when it was all said and done. And he didn't really have a lot of other – he was a guy that had started like 3 years at Minnesota or 20-something games. And then Texas hit on all of their recruits that they were looking at. And then that guy just kind of didn't have a spot anymore. I think Texas is likely – and I think with some of these linebackers, there's the kid from Louisiana that they've at least talked to a little bit. It's always been, I think, for some of these guys not named Ochaun Mathis. It's pretty clear he's a priority. It seems like everybody else might be on a let's wait until after the spring and see where we are. Will there be, their whole outlook could change if something in the next 4 practices occurs. If any of the wide receivers had an injury, the significant one, we already know that they want a wide receiver, but at that point it might make looking for a wide receiver more important. Same thing at linebacker position. Maybe they feel like it's less of a need because of the progress that Jacoby Ford has made during the course of this spring. He's been a real buzzy name. And at the same time, if something were to happen at that position, it might make their need even more so. So I think the thing that we probably haven't talked about enough with portal guys is even a guy like Mims, the 5-star offensive lineman, it might be they wouldn't want to do anything until they're completely clear of the spring, and only a unique situation would make that otherwise. I think the otherwise is what we're saying to everybody that's watching right now is that Ochaun Mathis is in one clear category, and everybody else that anybody wants to throw out from a name standpoint in the portal at best is wait and see. And for a lot of these guys, wait and see might not be good enough. So, I don't know what happens and like at what speed things might pick up once spring football ends. Is anybody else completely distracted by the fact that now everybody
I'm amazed that you're just glossing over the fact that
Ochaun Mathis's mom is here,
like
allegedly here. Like I haven't. There's no way for us to confirm that, but like
no, it isn't. And I saw an article as we were talking that she was referred to as Daniels in an article. So I'm just saying, if you're out there, Mrs. Mathis, shout out, glad to have you.
But like everybody, maybe leave her alone if just in case. But yeah, I think that it's a sexy thing to want to talk about the portal and what could happen. But man, there's just Jason. I feel like I wish it would be fun if Texas had 5 spots left, and it was like anything could happen in the portal. I think it would really make that interesting. The reality is, I think there's so little.
That's Ochaun's mom. I'm looking at it, and she said, "That's my maiden name, Daniel." And I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm looking at her YouTube profile, and it's got a picture of her son. That was her YouTube profile.
Fair enough.
I'm going with it.
Oh. Okay, so listen, can I recap then for her what I said on Monday?
Sure.
For our overreaction Monday. I said, and Jason, you never watch our videos, but Jason, can you like and subscribe to the channel for us? Can we start?
I'm the guy on the board saying, "Can you guys give me a written summary?"
I said, I said, Jason. Now you tell me if you agree. I said if Texas is able to get Ochaun Mathis to commit. Because I said, for me, the biggest thing about next week isn't necessarily the spring game. It's about, can Texas wow Ochaun to commit? And whatever happened in Nebraska, let that be in the rearview mirror. I felt like if that happens, if he's committing, then I felt like Texas' chances of getting to the Big 12 championship game tremendously increased, because I feel like he's kind of like the final piece that's needed on this defense, because they don't have an edge rusher. And I'm not saying that there aren't concerns on either side of the ball, but I'm saying there's components on each side of the ball. The one component that I think is missing is an edge rusher. To me, if Ochaun comes, all the pieces of the puzzle are on the table. Now it's just a matter of putting it together. If he doesn't come, I still think the defensive end piece is missing. Now, I know what Ketch is going to say, because you can tell by his face, but do you think that's hyperbole, Jason?
I don't think so at all. I mean, I would maybe say, yeah, they could still use another proven linebacker, but it sounds like Jalen Ford is having a tremendous spring, so that alleviates some of that concern. But, yeah, I mean, you're right, Anwar. There are guys that still need to prove themselves. The quarterbacks still need to prove themselves. Obviously, some young guys in the secondary. The defensive line overall needs to. But you have people there that can fill those spots, right? That can play well at those spots. They don't really have the guy at edge that you say, okay, I know that guy's the dude out there. I think if Ochaun Mathis commits to Texas, winds up at Texas, he's immediately. What is he? Maybe top 2 players on your defense? Maybe?
I was just about to say he might be their best player on defense.
Yeah, I would say him and Ochaun. I'd probably put 1A and 1B. So I mean that in itself tells you how much that can improve your defense. You're adding arguably your best player to the defense. So yeah, I would to answer your question, Omar. I think absolutely it immediately bumps up Texas's chances to make the Big 12 championship, and it fills a glaring hole the glaring hole that this staff really needs to fill.
I think there are 2 sides. So, no, Anwar, you saw me smile, and you guessed wrong as to what I was going to say. I was smiling because I was going to somewhat agree with you, but then it's what I'm about to say is it's going to sound like I'm only saying it because Ochaun's mom is in the chat. Right? So now I just feel self-conscious about the fact that I feel like everything that we're saying is stuff that we would say otherwise. It's a little weird knowing that mom's watching. It's a good rule of thumb to always operate. You never know who's watching. I think that we've been talking about this since last year. Edge rusher is the single most important need outside of fixing quarterback completely. It's the linchpin to what they want to do on defense. I mean, they've got a secondary that'll be a bit unproven going into next season. Do you know what would make the secondary better? Not having to guard their receivers for 6 seconds.
It's 7 Mississippi, and they're still trying to run around.
These things go together. They really do. And it's like, well, you didn't have an all Big 12 secondary piece a year ago. It was like, well, that's because nobody ever got to the quarterback. So quarterbacks were always able to eventually wait and find someone open. They need someone who can get to the quarterback. They needed it a year ago. They didn't have it. they weren't good on defense. When you look at this defense, they have pieces. They really do. I mean, we go back to the podcast or Modcast that we did a couple of months ago where I'm counting the number of guys that I think have NFL upside on the 2 deep. There's guys on the defensive line that in linebacker and secondary, but there's nobody at the edge rush position. And it may be the most important position on the field. Now, the flip side of that is it's still a team that will start an inexperienced quarterback. It's still a team that's got to fix the offensive line. It's still a team that I don't know what to completely think about the kicking game. But the single biggest need in the program is someone to come in and start at that edge position and give the Longhorns, if at all possible, plus play from it. It's why Ochaun Mathis is, with all due respect to Isaiah Nayor or even Ryan Watts, he's the single most important player that Texas will recruit. And it's the same at Nebraska. Do you know why? Because Nebraska has the exact same issue on its defense. So when you look at the final 2 schools, it would appear that Mathis is looking at, and Miss Mathis, if you want to answer that, if there's a 3rd school, maybe you could let us know that, because I'm working under the assumption that this is a bit of a Texas-Nebraska battle. Both of those schools have the exact same need. It is, can we get somebody that can come in here and fix this gaping hole that we have? And I think that need is a big part of what it would appear his recruiting process this second time. No 3rd school. So it's Texas, Nebraska, and whichever school he picks, he walks in with a little bit of pressure from both of those situations of like he's thought to be the Messiah at a position where a Messiah is needed. That might be a bit much, but it speaks to, I think, the importance of his decision because
he's the Messiah compared to what's on the roster.
Well, I was about to say, if he doesn't go to Texas, now Texas is left in a position where what's been available in the spring has to answer the questions in the fall. And I don't know that that's a good situation for Texas. It's less than ideal.
The thing though, well, clearly, if he doesn't come, then that's an issue, right? The thing is, though, the only reason I would say to disagree on the pressure thing is that he's been able to do it previously, especially here in the Big 12.
Yeah.
So, like, what a lot of times with these transfer portal guys, it's a lot of guesswork, right, Jason? It's a guy who excelled in high school, had a high ranking, got to a program, didn't get much burn. And then, and now you're hoping like maybe he can live up to the hype of what this kid was coming out of high school. I think in the case of Ochaun, he's the opposite. He's really what you want, right? You want the guy who actually did it before, has proven, and then has something to prove in itself because what his ultimate goal is, trying to get to the NFL and trying to get to getting here at Texas. So to me, that's almost the guy that you idealistically want more than the guesswork. You want a guy that you can check the box, and he's a guy to me that you just check the box and say, go do your thing. Go do your thing.
Well, I've said it a million times. I would much rather take, if I'm a college coach, a guy like Calvin Anderson, a guy that's going from Rice looking for a bigger platform, right? But he's been successful at the smaller platform. Ochaun's done it at a pretty big platform at TCU, so that's a win-win. I mean, he's done it against really strong competition. He has performed well. Versus like some guys you're mentioning, Anwar in Texas, has taken some of these guys that were high-level recruits, but they never did anything at the school they went to. Well, there's probably a reason they didn't do much at those other schools. So give me the guy that's, a proven commodity, even if it's coming from a smaller school. Ochaun's a proven commodity that's coming from a Power 5 school. So very, really no risk, high reward if Texas can land Ochaun Mathis versus some of the other types we've talked about.
It's funny, Jason. I think the staff would have loved if they'd have gotten another year out of Darian Dunn, who did the exact same thing. He goes, but by the end of the year, he was doing nice things. There was a bigger adjustment period there than I think first thought, but Herman would have been responsible for him coming into the program. And, in the end, it was like just as he was hitting his stride, his eligibility expired. I think the thing about Mathis is you like you said, you don't have to guess whether or not at this level he can perform. He has performed really well at this level. And I put this on there earlier because I think it's a really interesting point. I thought going into the spring that there was a potential elephant in the room. Is it this one? I don't know. Anwar, I'll Anwar, go ahead. I'm going to find the thing that I wanted to look at.
I think, I mean, she's here. I mean, why don't we just ask a couple of questions? I mean, and get a response. I mean, I'm curious, Ms. Mathis, how much does Gary Patterson weigh into your decision because of that familiarity that you guys have with him? Does that help? I'm clearly Texas in the top 2, so it's not working against you. So clearly it helps. I'm just curious the familiarity that you guys have with him. Does that help as far as the recruitment is concerned for a guy who can tell you, hey, this is what Texas is about from what I've been able to see from my vantage point?
Anwar, while we let her answer that question, how the Gary Patterson question, I thought going into the spring that Justice Finkley could be a ointment in the water for Texas, and that if he had showed up from day one and the only name we had been talking about all spring was, God, have you seen how Justice Finkley looks at the edge position? That, in a situation where let's say you're picking between Texas and Nebraska doesn't have anybody, and Finkley is a guy that just got hand selected by it. It might just give you a little bit of pause if that guy was dominating in practice. I'll be honest, as one of the guys that has nominated himself for Justice Finkley's, fan club presidency, Texas needs somebody this year. It will be asking a lot of Texas or of Finkley if Texas doesn't get Mathis and they ask a true freshman at the edge position to do what they're going to ask those offensive linemen to do, which is just take a huge responsibility and kind of own it and lock it down. And I think that's one of the things, as we'll be able to read her answer here in a second, I'll pop it up. I wondered if someone might emerge to be a possible co-answer, and it has not happened yet. So it only emphasizes the importance, I think, even more. By the way,
hold on. I'm sorry, Catch. So we got the answer. The answer, right? What do you think? What do you think of the answer, Catch?
I haven't read it yet. I was waiting for you to finish. I love Gary.
I'm trying to multitask. I'm sorry.
He helped mold my son into the individual player he is now, but his presence down not play a major factor with Ochaun's decision.
I'm sorry, Catch.
To go with you too. So there you go. Interesting. I mean, this will be the Modcast that's forever remembered as a time that Ochaun Mathis's mom came in and we just started interviewing her in the chat.
Probably our highest rated Modcast ever, too.
I think that, there's a part of me that just wants to ask her questions. She's been so willing to she's going with it. And it's been pretty cool to actually have this in the chat right now.
Mathis, get your son to announce at your house. If I don't know if she's still in Maynard, and we'll Orangebloods will come out there and live stream it. We'll do a Modcast from the announcement or something.
We get mom. Alex isn't here. We should just have mom on the Modcast.
There you go. Yeah. I like that idea better.
And when it's over with, Mrs. Mathis, the trick at the end of the show is that's probably a bad thing. All of us ask the public out there, like, hey, but probably not a good idea for a player's mother. Forget that I said that. Don't ask for things that you need. Just that's what we do. Anything else from the spring that we want to get into? I mean, the offensive line. I thought Alex had a real interesting note. And by the way, if anybody wants to ask her any more questions, Anwar, feel free. I mean, we can dodge and weave and kind of mix around. You know what? I have a question. She may not want to answer this, but Mrs. Mathis, the golden rule in recruiting used to be go with the mom. What does mom want? And the golden rules are different now. Like it's not quite that anymore. And it may be different when you're talking about he's not a kid anymore. He's a young man, right? Like she just described, Gary Patterson has helped molding him into the man that he wants. But does mom have a favorite? All things being equal, I'm asking mom if she personally has a favorite, and if she's one, maybe we know the answer. Maybe, I'd have to ask the Husker guys if she's hopped into any Huskers Illustrated chats. How big is mom's influence in recruiting these days when it's a portal guy? That's what I would like to know. Since the golden rule with 18-year-olds is that they matter significantly, what happens when a guy's old enough, to vote or buy things at the age of 21 and makes this type of decision?
Because you say at some point does he just say, "Mom, this is what I do," and mom is just along for the ride, or does it go back to like Boys to Men, like "Mama, I love you," and it is kind of like that.
There's one school that she could probably pick that she can get to easier for games,
yes,
than the other, and maybe that matters, and maybe it doesn't matter. It's the thing that with high school kids you talk about a lot. So. As a parent of twins, I find myself interested in the parenting side of this and like what happens when your kid is no longer necessarily a kid anymore and goes through this process that you aided them through when they were a kid, if that makes sense. Anyway, we'll either let her answer that or not. If anybody else has any questions or she has any other comments, we'll certainly go to them. I thought Alex's note on the offensive line was a little bit interesting today. And for those of you that are in the chat watching the video, check out the War Room tonight over at orangebloods.com. It's our weekly kind of insiders column. I know Alex is going to have more notes from today's practice, which was a shell practice. So it won't be the most newsy thing of all time. But, Andre Carrick still basically Hayden Connor has been playing left tackle this week. And it doesn't sound like Andre Carrick's absence has hurt the offensive line that much. There's a lot of things to take into that. But it's good to know that the offensive line isn't a player away from disassembling, that they moved a guy that's really an inside guy to left tackle, and it hasn't slowed the offense down. Even with practice today, there were reports that the offense had a good day, that both quarterbacks threw long touchdowns, those types of things.
Yeah, Connor did play tackle in high school, so it's not like he's totally foreign to that position. And a lot of people thought that might be his long-term future. So there's some versatility there. But yeah, it sounds like, I'm reading Alex's report as you're talking a little bit. And both he and Cole Hudson, the guy, I'll tell you, man, I think people really sleep on Cole Hudson. But, according to Alex's report, both are playing at above replacement levels. It's a great sign for the depth along the offensive line, which was an obvious concern.
For the record, Ochaun's mom answering the question, just wants son to be happy, allow for him to do what God gave him his gift to do. He loves football, good adrenaline pumping, screaming, balling out football. I can't say what program I would choose. Very good, politically correct answer there, Ochaun's mom, because I was needling there. I got to be honest. If she'd just come out and said, I want him to go to Texas, it'd be hard to go away from, no matter what anybody ever says, it becomes hard at that point to go away from what mama wants. But good answer, Mom. I appreciate you.
She gave a really good answer earlier because someone asked her about NIL. She said, Jesse, NIL is a business. Let's keep that personal. And it was like,
you are. She's great at this.
Salute. Yeah, like, all right. That you can tell by her cool, calm, collective manner that if Ochaun stepped out of line as a kid, he got that. He got that belt.
Well, I'm just saying that she can teach a PR class on how to answer questions without completely giving away answers that would get. She could have taught some Texas SID.
Maybe she taught those quarterbacks Anwar talked to today.
Exactly. Mama Mathis sat down with Quinn Ewers and Hudson Card and said, babies don't answer any of these questions. And then they didn't. And, it worked out really well.
That's how queens roll. That's how a queen rolls.
Always trust moms. Stay away from the dads. We're no good. as my wife reminded me earlier today. In terms of other things from the spring, anything hot that we need to jump on? Jason, is this the time where we jump into a little bit of recruiting discussion? I know we haven't done any of that. A&M picks up a commitment yesterday from one of the nation's top prospects, one of the top in-state players in the country. And it's funny because Texas isn't racking up commitments left and right. And I don't think it's that big of an issue, in part because most of the guys that are committing right now across the state haven't been the elite guys, but that's starting to change a little.
Bravian Rogers is pretty elite. Javon Thomas is pretty elite. 3 days in a row, A&M picked up commitments from players Texas offered and wanted. So, Texas was able to play the long game last year and finished, with an elite class, not as elite as A&M, of course, which finished with what is now considered the greatest class in the history of the Rivals rankings. But it's a little disturbing if you're a Texas fan that A&M is that momentum from last year's class has spilled over to this year's class. Whereas you said Texas is kind of operating a little slower, and not because they want to, it's just because guys aren't beating down the door to commit. I did a Q&A yesterday, and everybody's like, well, would Arch committing help? Well, of course, you get Arch Manning, that's going to pick up the pace on a lot of other recruits, but I don't see any signs that Arch is going to be committing, in the foreseeable future. So big week for Texas A&M, which I know is not what our viewers and listeners want to talk about, but Texas is playing a little bit of catch up again in this recruiting race to A&M. And that's a bad pattern, man. I mean, A&M, if that keeps happening year after year after year, A&M is going to separate themselves, and it's going to be tough to catch up. So the staff has some work to do in terms of recruiting with this 2023 class.
Hey, real quick, while we've got everybody in the chat, I want to remind you today at 2:00, right here on this channel, Serenity Douglas will have Keandre Coburn on for a live Q&A involvement video. So they'll be talking, obviously, Texas football. I'm sure Keandre will get all of the questions that you guys want to ask. Just want to remind everybody that literally in about an hour and 6 minutes, Serenity Douglas and Keandre Coburn will be live today. So bookmark that.
Hey, Catch, by the way, since we'll never speak tomorrow again, one of the things he did say last week, he was like, hey, sure hope we can get that TCU guy to come in and help us out. So
he did.
He did say that.
I didn't know that.
He did say that last week. He did a lot, in hindsight. When I go back, I'm like, he did drop a lot.
Anwar, real quick, I just want to ask you, the only Moro Ajomo question I want to ask you. There have been some people that his comments about the offensive line. Mm-hmm. My interpretation of that is he did like a half-hour media session. And there was parts of that media session where he talked about the program and buy-in and young guys and stuff like that. And to me, it seemed like he was at a different point was asked specifically about the offensive line position that he goes against every day, at which point he answered the questions and he mentioned a couple of guys and said, this guy's got to step up and this guy's got to step up. I personally felt like that wasn't connected to the other stuff, that he wasn't then calling out specifically offensive linemen and attaching them to these other remarks. Can you clarify that? Because I feel like I feel like anything that he would have been, you know what I mean? Like if the quarterbacks had been asked about the offensive line and one of them said, we got Andre Carrot playing left tackle and he's looking to take a step up this year. I don't feel like that would have been considered a call out, but because it happened on the same day as this other stuff, it feels like it's kind of gotten muddied a little bit. I just wanted a little clarification because maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, so for a couple of things. Michael, thank you. I appreciate it. Rob, if you want to treat me to a steak dinner, feel free at any time. Bill, we could have used another ball-headed brother today because it's just Ketch and I, and we don't really know what Jason has because he's always wearing a hat.
Not a lot.
He's got a mane.
So Jason's holding on to what little's left, and you need to join us because that looked really rough over there, Jason. Catch. So it was a 30-minute session or so, and so to kind of set it up, Morrow is a guy that is just blunt and very honest. But you ever talk to someone that's just to the truth, to the point, and maybe sometimes it could sound like they're being a certain way, but in context and tone matters. He was being asked questions, like he was being asked direct questions about the program, and he was just giving very direct answers, but nothing that I felt like he was saying. At no point, because look, I was there. Like, if I felt like, wow, this guy was coming at someone and he was trying to fire darts and bullets, I would have put that out immediately or did some follow-up questions. But the tone wasn't like attacking in nature. Now, when you read the words, it just in print, it sounds harsh, right? It's when he's talking about guys on the offensive line that step up. I need to see more from this guy. You need to see more from that guy. I felt like Morrow viewed himself as a leader on the team who is qualified to speak on certain things. And I think that within that, maybe his learning lesson will be saying, there's certain things you got to stay behind closed doors and certain things you don't. But I think this was just a new position for him as a leader. I think he was trying to speak as a leader, as a senior leader, and that combination of honesty. It sounded harsh, but I'm just telling you, like it in real time, I didn't take it that way.
Okay, fair enough. I'm glad because I personally just didn't view that as a call out as much as he was answering a specific question about something that he was asked about. And, I guess he could have said no comment, but at that point, why are you up there anyway? If
Catches like we want our athletes to be honest. And then when they're too honest, we say, no, not that honest, right? We want you to speak more until you speak more. And then you say, speak less. So it's sometimes we got to decide what we want, right? We hold these guys up to sometimes these unrealistic standards. And, you want honesty and transparency. And then, because if, like, to your point, Catch, if he was like, can't really talk about that. That's in-house. It's like, well, it's a waste of time. And then he says, he's like, said too much. I just think the last I'll say on Morrow is that I think he's a really good guy. And I know he's getting hammered by some folks, but I'm just saying, if you know the man and his heart was in the right place. He wasn't trying to smash it and even in the long answer, I don't feel like he was trying to be disrespectful. Catch, I wrote that from time.
I love this school.
Yes. From the time he said it on a Thursday, I felt like I could write it on a Sunday and write it in a way that clearly articulated what he's trying to say, but also the positives that he said. But if you grab headlines, and just take little snippets, it gets misconstrued.
Fellas, any other? Oh, Jason, I had a question for you. Back to the recruiting thing for a moment. I don't know that we would have thought Bravion Rogers would be committing this. You know what I mean? Like, So I guess my question is, of the top, 10 or 15 guys in the state at which he registers as one of those type of guys, who's the next big dog you actually expect to give a commitment, whether it's this spring or this summer? I mean, because it does seem like most of the biggest targets have indicated that they're going to wait until a little bit later, which is a bit unusual. I feel like this year the recruiting at the top is moving a little. Maybe it's because there aren't any quarterbacks at the top, like there have been. The one guy in the top 15 that is committed is the kid that's committed, the quarterback to Oklahoma, right? So usually quarterbacks kind of kickstart this thing, and not having a huge quarterback class, at least from my perspective, has slowed things down a little bit.
Yeah, most guys, you're right, are looking to wait. Kind of looking at this rivals list. Reuben Owens is a wild card. Who knows Shanahan nowhere near committing. Anthony Hill doesn't have a timeline. Toviano, not really a timeline. Jonte Cook has said previously he wanted to commit this summer, but when I asked him 2-3 weeks ago, he's like, I'm not so sure about that anymore. So, I know Connor Stroh, who's not super highly ranked. He's a Rivals 250 guy. He's going to decide this summer. He just told me last week, but I'm kind of going through that top 15. Braylon James, I don't think it's going to be Texas, but Braylon James is, he told me 2 weeks ago it's going to be, quote, very soon. So, I'm expecting that one to pop any time. But
who was that again?
Braylon James, a receiver out of Del Valle.
Okay, yeah.
Texas is very much involved there. He visited Texas recently, but I think it's probably going to be Notre Dame. So, Ketch, not a really, Jacques Petaway told me he's going to try to decide this summer, but not a big windfall of guys that, as you said, that are, just looking to. We'll have some unexpected decisions over the course of the rest of the spring and summer, but most guys are penciling in later commitment dates, right?
If another Bravion Rogers happens, and let's say before the month is over, and it went to A&M, would that be ring an alarm bell time?
Yes.
Not like a tornado siren, right? Wouldn't tell everybody to necessarily go get into their bunkers, but if a wild card really, because that guy's a great commitment for them. That's not a good one. That's a great one. He's a national top 40 prospect. If something like that else happened where it's pointing towards some momentum, continued momentum for A&M, is that a baby ring the siren moment for you?
Yes, absolutely. I don't want to get too negative here, but if I'm looking at this top 10, and if I'm saying I'm going to pick Texas or Texas A&M for these guys, okay, listen, some of them might wind up at Alabama or LSU or Oklahoma, but DJ Hicks, A&M, TJ Shanahan, A&M, Anthony Hill, I'd probably say A&M unless Texas gets Arch Manning, Javian Toviano.
You think Shanahan's going to A&M?
I'm just saying over.
If it was one of those two?
Right, over.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But yes, I do think A&M's a strong player for Shanahan. Toviano, I would have said Texas 3 months ago, but he was at A&M last weekend. They were picking up steam there. I'd probably say A&M. Ruben Owens, I'd probably say Texas, especially if Texas gets Arch Manning. Bravion Rogers, obviously he's committed to A&M. Jalen Hale would be A&M. Jonte Cook kind of goes with Ruben Owens. I'd favor Texas, but if they don't get Arch, that pendulum may swing back to A&M. Jackson Arnold, of course, is committed to Oklahoma. Malik Muhammad, I don't think he's going to either one of them. But to answer your question, that would be an alarm bell if one of those another top 10 player commits to A&M, because that momentum it's like just a snowball rolling downhill that just keeps getting bigger and bigger and picking up more steam for A&M. And Texas has got to find a way to combat that. And picking up an Arch Manning would help. And Anwar is going to hate to hear it, but the biggest thing they've got to do is they've got to win football games this fall to crush some of A&M's recruiting momentum.
Do we think, and Anwar, I'll toss this one to you, because there has been some thought that, if you're Arch and your Arch's camp, put the announcement thing, get it out there that it's going to be in the fall and maybe later. We'll see, right? But set the expectations that it's not a question that needs to be answered now. But if at the end of April, Arch has done a bunch of visits and feels like I know where I want to go and I want to help the program that I commit to in recruiting, I think we all think that would help. If Arch Manning commits, sub-question to you, Jason, before I go back to the question to Anwar, if Manning committed May 1st, do you think that Ruben Owens and Jonte Cook are committed to Texas by June 1st?
Maybe not June 1st, but I would say by the end of summer, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess my question would be, Anwar, going back to you, is that if Texas had more recruiting momentum and it was a sense of adding to this out-of-control momentum that might lead to an all-time historic class, do you think that might move his announcement date up earlier than what we're hearing with, it's going to be the fall, wants to take some visits, wants to see how teams look, that kind of thing. In a world where Texas is popping off some real recruiting momentum. Do you think that would change anything with Arch, or is he so separate that he's the Teflon man and nothing outside touches it or influences what he's doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing at the end of the day is that he's going to be able to do what he wants when he wants because he wants. You know, he's Arch. You know, the thought process behind the fall when I originally reported it, for those who are familiar with the report that I had a couple of months ago, from what I was told and relayed to is that everything that happened after last season, really around the December thing, had an impact on the Manning family because you had coaches who you thought were going to be at institutions for a very long period of time gone. You know, you all of a sudden had a Lincoln Riley who you never thought would leave OU unless he was going to the NFL, decide I'm going to go to USC. And Brian Kelly, who had everything going there at Notre Dame, CFP team, you know, always a top 10 huge contender. You know, he decides I'm going to go to LSU. Hell, we could have, Mrs. Mathis talk about, at one point, and of course it didn't happen in December, but, Gary Patterson has a damn statue out there at TCU, and he was out. So the thought process was, hey, look, there's a lot of crazy things that goes on in college football, and you can't always count that the person that you're committing to is going to be there, in the end. So let this thing play out a little bit longer based off of all the craziness and all the movement that we saw. Cristobal, leaving, going from Oregon back to Miami. Now, of course, there's some connections there, but still, Cristobal had a good thing going in Oregon as well. I think that's the thing, Ketch, where if you're the Manning family and you say, we want to make sure that when we commit, and not that we have to commit and then decommit and have to do all these other things. If you stay true to that and that's how you really feel, then yeah, waiting to the fall makes total sense for them to try to really get the lay of the land. Now, the only thing I will say this, Catch, in nothing in life is guaranteed, but I am pretty sure the coach who lands Arch Manning ain't gonna lose his job, right? I mean, unless something crazy happens, that's kind of like should be the ultimate instability. Like you get Arch, you're good for several years, right? You can hit the reset button. Hell, at that point, you probably go to the AD and you ask for an extension. But that being said, if the family's who's as humble as they are, I can see them not thinking that from that mindset and just saying, like, we just got to see and make sure.
Let's go on to parting shots. I got mine. So if anybody wants me to go first because they haven't given it much thought, just let me know.
I got one. So let Jason go first, because I know he hasn't given it thought.
I haven't. Texas will have some recruits in town this weekend. Colin Simmons, the number one player in the country on Rivals rankings, will be in Austin this weekend. So we'll have some recruiting coverage there. And that's about all I've got. I want a personal note. My daughter qualified. I'm somewhat excited. My 10-year-old daughter, my youngest kid, did the state gymnastics meet last week, and she qualified for regionals. So now I get my wife, I guess, gets to take her to Colorado for regionals in May. So
your wife is loving that.
Of course she is. She's like, we're going to stay a few extra days. Yeah, of course. Right. So my wife's from Colorado, for those who don't know. So yeah, thank God for frequent flyer points. I was teasing my daughter before the state meet. I'm going to grease the balance beam and the bar so that you slip off and you don't qualify. She did qualify. So I mentioned a while back, it's in May, I'm taking that whole week off. So I'll be at some point joining them in Colorado, which, me, Catch, that's never a bad thing from my perspective either. So proud of my daughter, and we get a trip to Colorado out of it. So.
Anwar, what about you? Well, hey, your daughter today, your older daughter, is that still left to do
Yes, she's the district track meet tonight. She ran the Open 400 last night. Didn't run her best time, so didn't have a great day. But tonight she runs in the 4x4, and they've got a chance to get out and go to
regionals.
Yeah, I think the area and then regionals. So, like I kind of jokingly said when she ran in Texas relays, and they ran their best time, they did well. But I said my daughter's Leander fast, but she ain't Texas relay. That's a whole other world when you're at Texas relays, man.
So many layers. So many layers to that.
Yes, but yeah.
Anwar, I'm definitely letting you go next.
Because there's so many. Oh, that was hilarious, Jason. That's so rich. Now you remind me of my son's got another AAU basketball tournament this upcoming weekend. So I definitely now remember. Now that you said it, I was like, "Ooh, I got to go out to Total Wine. I gotta make sure I'm nice and loose for these games on Saturday, so my anxiety will not come back during these third, fourth grade competitions." So thanks, Jason. One other thing, we keep asking this. They asked me in the chats about the steak thing. I will be go at Del Frisco's in Houston had invited me to come to taste a good steak. And so when I get a chance, which will probably be, I think in another month or so, I'll be heading out there. I'll check out the Del Frisco's in Houston. Got any other steakhouses here in Austin that want to step their game up, and I'm more than willing to go there because I've been a little bit disappointed. I mentioned disappointed in Three Forks, disappointed with VYs. And so Del Frisco's offered to give me that steak experience, and I need it because somebody's been slipping. But my real party shot, though, is this. Catch, I think you'll agree with me. I'm all for the understanding and justification and rationalizing of a program not doing well or a program doing things that some people may question. I'm okay with that. And that's not just Texas related. That's really kind of all college football. But one thing I'm asking everyone to do, Catch, when you want to start talking about your program and start looking for comparisons, can you stop comparing your coach to Nick Saban? Can you please just stop comparing? Nick Saban would do this. Nick Saban would do that. Nick Saban in his first year, he only won about 6 games. Nick Saban is the GOAT. Again, we do these comparisons and ignore the 7 national titles. We ignore all the conference championships. We ignore all the winning seasons after winning seasons after winning seasons. Hell, we ignore that he won a national title at LSU before he even got to Bama and then established that success there. I'm just asking, whenever you want to start talking about what your program is about or what your coach is doing or anything to that effect, it's cool. It's cool, but don't compare it to Nick Saban. That's like comparing every 6th-round quarterback to Tom Brady. Our team drafted a guy in the 6th round. Tom Brady was the 6th rounder. Our guy's got an undrafted free agent, and Arian Foster was Stop with the comparisons. Stop comparing him to and Arian Foster's not the GOAT. Stop comparing him to the greatest coach of all time. Until your coach accomplishes what Nick Saban has, keep his name out your mouth. That's all I'm saying. That's
Onward. Do you know what my favorite example of the thing that you're talking about is? It's an old one. I'm old enough now that I was around when Zach Thomas was coming out of Texas Tech. And when Zach Thomas made it to the NFL out of Texas Tech, back in the day in recruiting, huddle didn't exist. So kids really counted on guys like myself and Jason to kind of promote their kids and get their name out there and let people know about them. And there was a period of time where every 5'9", 5'10" linebacker in the state would want some love. And the example would always be, well, look at Zach Thomas is in the NFL. And it was like, nah, it's a unicorn. You can't do the unicorn comparison. Nick Saban may be the all-time we got to put a U in GOAT. He's just got to be like Woat or Yote or something like that because he's the greatest unicorn all time. And yes, I'm with you on that. Just by the way, if you have a 5'10" high school linebacker that's your son, the rules have not changed. It's still more unlikely than it is likely. Just FYI. And look, I'm 5'10". I get it. My final parting shot. I'm speaking to the entire Texas fan base here. And I'm thinking about writing a column about this to some degree. It probably won't be my 10 thoughts column. It would probably be a rogue thoughts column later today. But the last 12 years have been hard on Texas fans, right? Because it just hasn't, it's been a long time since the program's been quite what Texas fans and supporters would want them to be. I think the events from this week are a reminder that everybody should probably. I was having a conversation with my wife this week about her family. And I was like, Heather, life is hard, right? So if your niece is having a hard time and your sister's having a hard time and mom's having a hard time and you're having a hard time, like life's hard. Like have some respect for the fact that life can be hard. And don't put so much pressure on yourself to be this thing that really doesn't exist. And I would say the same thing about Texas fans. Like when the Moro Ajomo thing happened in the last week, so many people have had instant reactions. And it occurred to me like 5-7 was 5 months ago. There hasn't been enough healing time. Like I feel like what the average person would need is some healing time from all of the things that have happened over the course of the last 12 years that have put everybody on edge. And all I would say is don't freak out when like you find yourself reacting quickly with even with anger, or you find yourself impulse answering questions or people. Like at the end of the day, you have to know who you are. And you guys have been fans for a long time of a football program that has been underperforming. And, I think everybody's just a little bit on edge about that. So when something happens and people react, don't be too hard on the people reacting. Their brains are scrambled. Like their emotions are scrambled. And consequently, maybe the next time you have an impulse to snap or yell, just remember, you know what? It's not really needed. Everybody's doing that. A little bit of self-awareness of where this program has been and how everybody probably feels about it should probably be prescribed for everybody, because I think potentially if you can be self-aware about that it's just been hard. And like, it'd be hard for anybody. Then I think you could be a little bit easier to cut yourself and other people a little bit of slack when they react emotionally to something that, probably doesn't require the outrage. Because what happened this week was not that the media really had this huge overreaction to the comments that Sark made. The big overreaction was from people who were overreacting to things that just didn't happen. Like the media really didn't pay any attention to that on a regional or national level. It was a very local story. And that even on Thursday, we're still talking about it, speaks to weirdly the overreaction to something that I don't think was even there. So just FYI, K-Drag is saying the media was short-sighted. I'm only arguing that perhaps your reaction to the media's reaction was a bit much and unnecessary. But what I'm telling you is I'm not mad at you because I understand how on edge you are, right? I mean, I get it. This thing went 5-7 a year ago. In reality, some people got mad at what I said. And the only thing that I really said is I didn't know if I agreed with the approach that Sarkisian took towards Moro Ajomo. That's not crazy talk. That's just a very light opinion of disagreement. And if we're going to completely overreact to very slight opinions, what's going to happen when bigger, more just bigger, I guess, opinions kick in? The answer might be we all eat each other, and I don't think that should be the answer. So just a little bit of a pep talk. Everybody dial it down a notch with a little bit of respect to what you're going through as a fan right now. has not been easy. Give yourself a woo-saw moment, and let's hope for some wins in the fall. Believe me, Anwar would love to go to a badass bowl game in January.
I would like to go to a bowl game.
See, Anwar, you didn't say that.
I mean, I've done one January bowl, was the Sugar Bowl in 8 seasons. And I think we did a Alamo Bowl, which was like on New Year's Eve. I think you and I rang in the New Year doing our post-game show together, if I'm correct, or very close to it, I would say. And mostly it's been, hell, I like to get on a plane again to go to a bowl game and not have to drive just a couple of hours. Like that would be nice. I'm all for it. The thing is, Ketch, last thing I'll say, just 30 seconds, not to hijack your thing. Winning is actually, people think like the media is attacking, and I would say from our perspective, winning is actually good. The one of the best Catch off seasons I think we've had since I've been here was after the Sugar Bowl.
Oh yeah,
it was the most positive, fun off season of just good positive stories, good positive energy. Talks of recruiting, like it was like the best. And I like that. And look, if Sark is going to be a guy that's going to put 9 to 10 every year, hell, I'll take that. I'll take the consistency of Gundy. Gundy's going to give you 8 to 10 every year. You take that. I'll take that. But get the loser, it just makes everyone hostile, unfortunately.
I would just let everybody know our lives are so much better. It's been a long time, Jason, since the good old days where 10 wins was like something that people would get angry about. Yeah. Trust me, if you think we enjoy chaos, we don't. We don't. What we enjoy, that we're like you guys, we haven't experienced it enough in a really long time. But yeah, man, it's more fun to travel to the Rose Bowl. I went to like 3 Rose Bowls in 5 years. That was so awesome. I stood next to Michael Duncan Clark in the concession stand, and he was like, I'm a subscriber to Orangebloods. And I was like, this is awesome. Trust me, we like awesomeness more than we like chaos, just so you know. By the way, Rob is constantly telling you in this chat session, Anwar, to look for his direct message.
I'm looking right now. He says he's taking me out to a steak dinner.
That's what I thought. Yes,
it's a steak dinner, Rob. It's not as friends, by the way.
That's just Anwar's going to have to put out.
What's a steak dinner, Jason? All right.
We're done.
Everybody subscribe to the channel, like the video. It has been memorable to say the least. For Jason, Anwar, myself, and of course, Ochaun Mathis's mom, who was a guest star, maybe the star in today's Modcast. Yeah, who am I kidding? Who was the star? We put her on the marquee. And by the way, Mrs. Mathis, should Ochaun commit and sign with Texas, or however the official word is on the portal, you have an open invite to show up on the Modcast. Any Modcast you want between now and the start of the season. We'll have you on for sure. I'd love to have that would be wildly entertaining to get insight. And yes, Serenity just popped in. Serenity, don't worry. I've been telling people in 35 minutes, Serenity going live with Keandre Coburn, the type of access to Texas football players you don't get anywhere else on the planet. Serenity bringing it to you in 35 minutes. Just hang out on the Texas Football Channel on Orangebloods or on our YouTube Orangebloods channel. For the rest of the day, we will have you covered for all of us. And yes, Ochaun Mathis's mom. You guys have a fantastic week, fantastic weekend, an absolute lovely Easter weekend. Do some Easter egg hunting. Well, we'll talk to you next week when it will be on the eve or close to on the eve of the Texas spring game. Until then, you guys take care of each other. Again, Serenity and Keandre in 34 minutes later.